Okay, welcome everyone to another Keptn community meeting. We are happy to have a couple of folks here already online. If you're joining later on, we are also recording this and it will be on YouTube. So no worries if you're missing the first couple of minutes. We got a couple of exciting news and then we will do the procedure as always, going through the list of PRs, and we'll discuss what's going on in the next week. And also Johannes will share a little bit of the roadmap around the next generation of the shipyard. First of all, we're following here the CNCF code of conduct, since Keptn is a CNCF sandbox project. That basically means please be nice to each other and indicate if something's a little bit out of boundaries. Another thing, being this CNCF sandbox project, we now have our official CNCF Slack channel. So if you want to join us, also please make sure to join us in the CNCF Slack channel. All the team members of the Keptn project are also in the Slack, so you can also go there to ask some questions. You might already know our own Slack channel. It's on slack.keptn.sh, so you can also still use this channel, because right now we don't want to get rid of it, since we have a couple of very interesting discussions already there, and we just want to keep the history of these discussions also to be kind of a hub for answering questions. You can use the search function to find some questions and answers that you might have. If you want to get started with the Keptn project, as always, please go to goodfirstissue.dev or click on the link here to go to our GitHub repository and find Good First Issues. And if you want to stay up to date, please follow us also in our Keptn mailing list or join us in our Google group where you can get started and where you can follow us. So with this, I'm already handing over, I guess, this time to Andreas. And if you have any questions in the meantime, please put them in the chat. Otherwise, we'll just go through the list of noteworthy issues and PRs. And later on, Johannes will share a little bit of the roadmap for the next generation of the shipyard. So please, Andreas, I'm handing over. Please go ahead. And if there are any questions, I will just I will pick them up and throw them in as they come.
Cool. Thank you. So, as already described last time, we are now shipping Keptn as a Helm chart. So that means you can install Keptn using a Helm chart. And of course, you can directly use this Helm chart in order to install Keptn. And therefore, I've added an advanced section in our documentation, which describes how you can use the Helm CLI in order to install Keptn. And for example, where the repository is located of our installer. This, of course, now allows you some advanced use cases. For example, you can override values using the set command. So by adding --set, you can now override, for example, the registry of all our images. And this can be especially handy if you have an air-gapped system and, for example, you cannot access Docker Hub, where usually our images are located. So this was the first issue which I would like to present. And as always, if you directly have any questions, please interrupt me. So the second issue I worked on was a bridge issue. So now the bridge can be used in order to send an approval finished event. That means an approval finished event is the response of an approval triggered event, and this approval triggered event can contain labels. However, if you used the bridge in order to approve this approval triggered, we lost these labels here. And therefore, I'm now passing in these labels in the bridge, and therefore I first have to convert it into a map, and then afterwards add it to our post request. So there was a question. Did I hear correctly? We are now using. Yeah. Okay. This is a question
the questions,
to Jürgen.
when they
we
are
can
like
take it afterwards, I guess.
Yeah.
This was my second issue. And finally, there was a small bug in our Keptn update project command. This command allows you to set an upstream afterwards, and basically we did not correctly link our local branches with the upstream branches, and this was also addressed in this pull request. Here I'm basically setting the upstream and directly pushing it to the upstream repository. So here I'm using the git CLI and make a push, set the upstream to the upstream repository specified by the Shouri, and also specifying the branch. So that's from my side. Now the next one would be Imre. I don't know whether he is
So
here.
I'm just throwing in a question here. So Rob was asking if we now use the CNCF Slack and not the Keptn Slack. So actually we have now the possibility to use both Slack options. So most people still use our own Slack channel, which is on slack.keptn.sh, because it's they are already used to it, and it has a long history already of conversations, and we don't want to lose it. But if you're already part of the CNCF Slack, and you also want to interact with the Keptn team, you can just use the CNCF Slack and just go to the Keptn channel, and it's the first starting point to interact. We might then ask you to join our own Slack channel if we already have some similar discussions there that you can also join, but both ways are totally fine. So you can go either on slack.cncf.io and join us there, or on slack.keptn.sh. Yeah, sorry for maybe interrupting here a bit, but yeah, Johannes is already sharing, so we are moving over. Imre, as Andreas said, is unfortunately not joining the meeting today, so we will just skip this part and hand over to Johannes.
Yeah, and so isn't Shouri. Shouri also started to work on an issue. He finished his issue with a pull request that was accepted, but unfortunately he's not on the call today. So it's now time to go over my issues. First of all, I started fixing some issues and some troubles in the installation guide. Imre was pointing out that there were a mismatch between API token and Keptn endpoint. At some parts we used the term Keptn API endpoint, and in other parts we use the term Keptn endpoint, and now it's streamlined and everything is now just Keptn endpoint. Thanks for this close look on the documentation. It's always good to also get feedback on that. And maybe just as a quick reminder, this week I created a Slack channel in our Keptn Slack workspace, and this channel has the title Keptn Docs, and whenever you find a typo or want to have improvements regarding wording and so on, just post it there, and from time to time I will take a look into the channel and will work on this feedback. All right, then the second issue I was working on was actually implemented. I hadn't touched code, but the documentation was missing, and the issue was about adding labels to the chart in the Keptn bridge. Thanks to Rob, he brought up this idea, and he proposed to add a label there so that we can then differentiate between certain builds. And the solution is now that let me directly go to the documentation so I can show you the solution. Because whenever you now have a label that is called build ID, then the bridge takes the value of this label and adds it to the chart. Here I have an example. In this evaluation done event, I have the build ID set to build 21, and this value is taken and used as a label on the x-axis of this chart. And this now helps to better visualize and to better see which builds are actually evaluated. All right, you're welcome, Rob. It was a good idea and not that difficult to implement. All right, then I want to go to my next issue, which is all about updating the spec for the Shipyard 0.2. It is still in progress and not merged yet, but instead of going to this pull request and talking about the specification, I will now move on and go over to the roadmap, because a very central part of Keptn 0.8 will be the new shipyard file. And in the next couple of minutes, I will tell you and I will explain you how the new shipyard will look like. And for you to get started, also to think about the new way of the shipyard file, let me point you to the roadmap of Keptn. You will find it always in the GitHub organization. Here on the organization, there is the project. And the project has one board, which is the roadmap. And in the roadmap, you will find nodes that references Keptn enhancement proposals. And for 0.8, we have now one Keptn enhancement proposal we are working on, and this is the next generation of the shipyard. Here in this node, I explain briefly what's the end user value of implementing this CAP, but more details can be found in the enhancement proposal itself. Actually, it's the written document of this epic, and it explains everything, almost everything that needs to be implemented to get to the benefits of the new shipyard. And instead of going to through this specification and this proposal, I have prepared a couple of slides, and I will now walk you through these slides and explain what the new shipyard will be. Therefore, I'm just switching over to my slides, and we'll make it a little bit bigger. And the next couple of minutes, they are focused on Shipyard 0.2. As I said, it's written down in this CAP, and also the change on the spec is there, and this is referenced in this pull request. Just a quick reminder, what's the shipyard? As you all know, the shipyard defines the stages a new artifact has to go through. And therefore, a stage has a name property, a deployment strategy, test strategy, then you can add a remediation strategy. And since Keptn 0.7, the approval strategy has been added to the shipyard. And this is the way someone can customize the shipyard file and the process of staging an artifact. But what we have learned is that this is too much opinionated, and folks out there that are already using Keptn, they are asking for a better, for more customization, because there are different ways of doing delivery, and also when it comes to remediation, there are also different kind of workflows that they want to implement. And we figured out that there are too many limitations. 3 of those limitations I have now listed here. First of all, what we do in the shipyard is that we mix the delivery workflow also with the remediation part. Let's take a look into the production stage, for example. Here we have a deployment strategy that defines, on the one hand, how a new artifact is deployed in this stage, and one line below we define that we also want to trigger remediation actions whenever there's a problem. And well, we do not differentiate between these two workflows. We keep them very close, and this makes it complicated and not very well formulated. Then there is also a problem that in this version, we don't support to add a custom task to a delivery workflow. It's not possible that you can, for example, do a migration step before a deployment, or to do some kind of approval after a testing phase. This is actually not possible. And last but not least, you have also no possibility, or there is no possibility to define what is actually a trigger of a workflow. Right now, we trigger the delivery workflow with the new artifact event, and the remediation workflow we trigger with a problem open event. But there are different kinds of events that also should work as a trigger, and this is not possible to declare. And those limitations, yeah, they were the motivation why we started to think about a new Shipyard version. And this new Shipyard version is 0.2, and it will address the limitations that we saw in in the current version. And I will now explain one by one what is meant by that, and also what's the benefit, what's the user value of the new feature that comes with the new Shipyard. But before we go through the user benefits, I will take a look at the specification itself. Yeah, on top of a Shipyard specification, you will now find the metadata of this specification. It's just the API version, then the kind, and here you have the flexibility to add any kind of metadata to the Shipyard that helps you to custom or to identify this configuration. Then the next property is the SPEC property. As we are used from Kubernetes, this is a common way of then declaring what's actually part of the specification. And the main property there is the stages property, because here we just say, well, our Shipyard consists of a couple of stages, and this property takes a list of stages. A stage itself has a name, and it defines workflows. These are the two properties that are related to a stage. And the workflow itself also has a name. It has a triggers property, and then it can define tasks. And when we go further down, we see that a task has also a name, and then below there are arbitrary properties that specify or also provide some metadata to this task. All right, let me just summarize. We have the metadata of the Shipyard itself. Then we have the stages property. Each stage has a name and workflows, and the workflow has also a name, triggers, and tasks. And the task has also a name and some properties. All right, there's a question coming in. Is the trigger a cloud event? Yes, that's a good question. And yes, that's the case. Here, you can define a cloud event, or you must define a cloud event, which will then be the trigger of this workflow.
I would also have a question. The tasks themselves, they are user-defined or they are predefined?
Good question. I forgot to mention that we from the Keptn project, we have kind of reserved tasks, which are approval, deployment, evaluation, test, remediation, and release. But I will show you on the next slide, customer that the Keptn user can add any kind of task he wants to execute in this workflow. This means that someone can bring in its own task so that he can then extend this particular workflow.
Okay, cool. We got another question from the community. The task section, has it a specific execution order? And how is the kind of continue on error if it's supported or not, or how is this working? The question is from Rob. So Rob, you're on the call. If you want to unmute yourself and just ask the questions in your own words, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll pass it on to Johannes.
Yeah, very good question. And the answer is that those tasks are executed in sequential order. And whenever there is one task that failed, then the workflow will stop.
Okay. Great.
Okay.
So do we really stop the workflow? Sorry. Rob, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you just for consideration, maybe just for, you know, because I know some pipelines can, you know, depending on what it is, support parallel task execution. So just maybe a consideration as you're thinking about it. You know, there could be some tasks that could run in parallel and then converge. Just, but again, I know we're starting simple, but just something to think about.
Yeah, that's actually it's a point that we also considered while we were talking about the new shipyard, and the answer to that is when you have parallel tasks, then you will have, for example, two Keptn services that have subscription to one particular event, and when this event is sent out, then for example, two Keptn services that are for testing, they will then start to work and they will then respond with a finished event. And when Keptn receives both finished events, then it will go on.
Gotcha. And right. So if we had like a custom service, like I know like Andy built a, you know, a service that could just call an arbitrary bash script, right? Or some external integration. Is that also kind of envisioned in this too? Like you could have a task that would call out to something outside of Keptn, as long as there was like a service that was the intermediary?
I mean, you can.
So for example, like the blaze meter service that they were talking about. So it's maybe that's a bad example. I guess where I'm going is, if I needed to call external things, I'm assuming you would have to have a custom Keptn service in your environment that was listening for these events and would publish these events back.
Right.
So is that what's meant by these kind, like you have kind functional, kind performance? Is that what the kind of defines sort of an interface that's expected by the task?
No. In this case, the kind is just a property that specifies this task, but it has no functional meaning. The recipient of this test event can take this property to make a decision whether he can execute the task or not. But it's just additional metadata to this particular task. And you have the flexibility to add any data you want. Whatever you want, you can here add, and then this property will be added to the cloud event, and this cloud event will then be sent over to the recipient, to the receiver of this event, and then the recipient takes care of reading it, executing it, depending on what is implemented.
Gotcha. Okay.
Andreas, you brought up one thought about not stopping a workflow when it failed somewhere.
Yep. For example, currently our tests can fail, but we afterwards do an evaluation, and I guess this is still needed. So even if the tests fail, we go on, and for example, the evaluation triggered event is sent out, and the evaluation service, the Lighthouse service in our case, has to decide whether it makes an evaluation or not.
Right. I mean, I think the default would be you'd want it to fail, but maybe there's just an option to say ignore on error, because you see that a lot, or possibly maybe even retry, like specifying the number of like retries, just ideas. I don't have a specific use case at the top of my head, but just things I'm thinking about for more flexibility and control.
Yeah, but I don't think that, like, if the test evaluation fails, it's not that the service is failing, so it would not be a fail on error, in my opinion. It's more like the evaluation was successful, like the evaluation itself, the technical part of the evaluation was done successfully, but the result is that the tests are not satisfying. That, like, there was a high error rate in the tests, so they have failed. But I think it's different from like a real service failing, like crashing during execution, or if it's just the outcome of like the result is failing, right, or warning instead.
Correct. It's more the outcome, right? I mean, I'm just thinking, like, Jürgen, in Azure DevOps, there's a control. Like, if you expand the control option within Azure DevOps, one of them is ignore on error or continue on error.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's more when, like, the container crashes or this particular workflow crashes, then you just continue. I think that's not the case for Keptn. I think it would stop.
Right. So good news is we already differentiate between the result and the status. So the result is really whether the evaluation was successful or it was a warning or failed, and we have the status, which can be succeeded, failed, and unknown. So we already have this encoded in our cloud events.
All right, then I will move on to the next slide. That brings me to the first user benefit, because what we now achieve with this Shipyard Overview is that we separate the workflows from each other. We have one that is for delivery, the other one is for remediation, and when someone wants to bring in another workflow into a stage, then he can define it, depending on his or her needs. Let me just show you an example. Again, the specification. I have here a production stage. This production stage has workflows, and in this case, it's an artifact delivery workflow, the first one, and the second one is a remediation workflow. And this workflow is triggered by this kind of event. It's actually the artifact delivery from the preceding stage, which is hardening. When this one is done, then this one will kick in and will do its job. And the remediation workflow, this one is triggered whenever there is a problem open event in this particular stage. And what this helps us is now that we can very nicely separate the workflows from each other, and we have them also explicit definition of what is done when one workflow is executed. Then the second benefit is that someone can bring in a custom task to a workflow. Let me just give you an example. Again, we have here a stage which is called hardening. We have an artifact delivery workflow that is triggered based on an artifact delivery from the dev stage. And here in this case, the person decided to do a migration step at the beginning, for example, doing a database migration from one to another. And this task can be added to the shipyard. And then when you create the project, the shipyard will be used to create the project. And then Keptn knows that you want to send out a migration event before the deployment should be executed. And it's not limited to a certain number of tasks. You can add as many tasks as you want, depending on your requirements and your needs. And again, you can add arbitrary properties to each task, to customize those, and also to provide more information for the Keptn service that is receiving this task or this event.
So a quick question here. So when you say the task will send migration event, is it then that Keptn will send any kind of cloud event, which is called in this case migration, or?
Right. Keptn will then send out.
So it's not fixed anymore for the cloud event type.
No.
Okay.
We provide a default set, which is the default set for those tasks.
Yeah.
But going forward, you can add any kind of task here.
Okay.
And then Keptn will send out a sh.keptn.migration.triggered. And Keptn is waiting for an sh.keptn.event migration finished.
Okay.
When this comes in, then Keptn knows, yeah, someone has executed this task, and then it goes on and sends out the next event, which will then be the deployment event.
So you can really customize all stuff. That's cool. And is it which kind of metadata will be sent within the event? All the labels and so on as well?
Yeah.
Okay.
All the labels like project service stage and
Custom labels.
And custom labels like that one.
Okay.
Here in this case, you say, I want to add a custom label database which has the value perf test or whatever. What else? Something else.
Yeah, but the other labels, when let's say I'm sending in what is called deployment finished event with some custom labels, they will be passed over through the entire stages as well, right?
Right.
Okay.
What we are working on is the Shipyard Controller. I will now or will explain at the end, because the Shipyard Controller then takes care of collecting all the data that's coming back from the services and kind of accumulating everything so that this approval step knows what happened in the migration step and the deployment step, test step, and then can do or can provide this information to someone who has to do the approval.
Okay, thank you.
Very good questions are coming in. Thanks. All right. Yeah, this was the custom task. And I will now go on to the third user benefit, which is the specification of the trigger event, because this allows us to model very neat staging processes. I will show you. Let me just take this example. Here in this example, I have a dev stage, which then promotes into hardening, which then goes on to a pre-prod environment. And then we have, for example, the situation that we have two customers, customer A, customer B, and both customers have an own environment, but they want to get their artifact from the pre-prod environment. And this is now also possible with this new Shipyard file, because what you have to do is you have to define your staging process for dev, hardening, and pre-prod. And for the stage production customer A, which is this one, you just say list, this is wrong, sorry, trigger the artifact delivery when pre-prod is also done. And the same is true, or the same you have to configure for the second environment. You also say trigger this delivery workflow when pre-prod artifact delivery is finished. And this, yeah, allows us to model scenarios where you can do a staged rollout to customers or to any kind of environments that you want to feed and you want to serve by one preceding stage. All right, yeah, And last but not least, the very central component that takes care of reading the shipyard file, interpreting it, and sending out the events, and also listening for the finished events is the so-called Shipyard Controller. It will become the brain of Keptn that understands this new format of the shipyard and also takes care of managing all the events that should be sent out and should be received. And he is also the component that takes care of triggering a workflow whenever any kind of cloud events occurs and should be or sent to Keptn.
I have another question. When looking at, okay, I think you need to rewrite it from listen to trigger, right?
Yeah.
When
was the last.
so this is a YAML array under trigger. So can I define multiple trigger events?
Good question, and yes, you can.
Okay.
For example, in this case, it's not that. For a delivery workflow, there's always a promotion from one step to, from one stage to the next one. But let me go back to the remediation use case. Let's just say, in case of production artifact delivery dot finished. In this case, you would also trigger the remediation use case whenever the artifact delivery finished. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
All right. I think we have another participant, Sumit, and he wants to ask a question. Jürgen, can you please promote?
Yes, I just allowed him to talk. So Sumit, you can just ask the question right away.
Sure. So my question is that for our specific scenario, we usually do a lot of parallel deployment. Just to give an example, when to validate one specific namespace in place of one namespace validation Keptn quality gate, we validate maybe around 10, 20, 50, or 200, or even 500 namespace with the data. What we are right now doing is that we are running every namespace as a separate pipeline. Now, when you explain just before that, the parallel thing, we believe that parallel thing is already there, but what is your suggestion to handle this specific use case? Because we are getting a lot of 500s when we are doing this process, which is the normal quality gate process for a namespace validation. Is that question is clear?
Not 100%. Let me just summarize. You have an environment with a lot of namespaces, and you do a validation of each namespace using our Keptn quality gates.
Right.
And you want to do this in parallel, right?
Right.
Okay, then just to understand, do you have different projects, Keptn projects that manage the different namespaces?
Yeah, so we do something, we do little different thing other than the normal project. So we certify something called namespace scaling. So namespace scaling is something which we have built within Intuit for horizontal scale. So you can have multiple namespace created and doing exactly the same thing. And through our loader, we will go and execute the test against those namespaces. So each namespace is exposed as an ingress endpoint, and it has a specific functionality to serve, which has been executed by our Argo workflow. Now, that one pipeline is, think about that you have one service and you are validating that service with the throughput, error, and the percentile. Now, like that, at the same time, you are doing for 50 to 100 namespaces, we see a challenge.
I'm not sure if I understand the problem correctly.
Okay. Probably I can share sometime and talk about that, how it is. Or take a simple example. You have one pipeline, right? Take example, if that one pipeline become 100 pipeline same time. Is there any better way to optimize, or you still want it to run the 100 different pipeline?
Well, in a Keptn world, a pipeline is a shipyard specification.
Right.
And it's related to a Keptn project. And depending on the number of services you have onboarded to this Keptn project, all these services share the same pipeline, so to say. And when you have one project and let's say 20 services, then all these 20 services have the same pipeline. And when you do an update of this pipeline, then each service is affected. But when you differentiate, or when you have, depending on the number of projects, you have to keep the pipelines up to date and in sync.
Okay. So what you are saying that whatever we have, let's use that. There is no separate concept of parallelism of doing a separate pipeline. My question was more because you gave that there is a way you can do multiple shipyard quality gate functionality in a parallel. But now I'm hearing that we need to do that. One is a different use case, and what I'm asking is not relevant to that.
But it's a really interesting question, and also for me, it is not 100% sure what exactly you would need. So, would you be available for follow-up, Sumit?
Yeah, I will be available.
Cool. Then Johannes and myself, we will ask you for follow-up. Cool.
All right. Yeah. This was it from my end. An update on what we are working on for the next couple of weeks. And this will also be a very central component of the Keptn 0.8 release. All right. Then let's go on. This was a presentation. Yep. Let's jump over to the working items for this week and what has been accomplished. Let me go through the ready for review column. I will skip the first couple of issues because Shouri is not in the call and neither is Armin. Andreas, you showed us the documentation for the air-gapped systems. Then you showed us the bug fix on passing labels from one event to the next one, and also that one that was related to the Git upstream. All right, then in the progress column, we have one issue that I created, and I will maintain it as a kind of always open issue, because what we experienced in our releasing process is that the integration tests for Keptn and for the master branch, they are flaky because from time to time they fail, and it's very difficult to understand what's the reason because of the failing test. And I will use this issue that we post their findings in regard to the flakiness of our integration tests. Then, Andreas, what's the status of the Keptn Cloud events?
I already started, but it's not done yet. So probably next week I can present it.
All right, cool. And yeah, the same is true for this issue. I started to work on the Shipyard 0.2 specification. Also, I showed you today how it looks like, but still a couple of tasks are necessary to get it done. And next week I will hopefully show you the outcome of that one. Imre is not this call. He worked on this issue, but next time he should give us an update on that one. Then here we have two that are assigned also to Imre and to Shouri. And now let's go over to the backlog and what's in the backlog for the next week. First, the installer, there we need to allow to configure a prefix in the Keptn path. Andreas, you created this issue. Can you give us a short update on that one, or what's still necessary?
So basically, the goal of this issue is to have a prefix for the Keptn URL in the Keptn path, and I would like to have this dynamically configured. So dynamically means during the installation, and this is easily possible for our API, but in the bridge we will need some changes, and yeah, this is still open.
Okay, okay. This means that you have to work with our airmen,
right,
on that one. Mm-hmm. Cool. Then the next one is adapt Kubernetes labels in local manifests. This is also dev related because in the master branch of the Keptn project, we have manifests for developing the different services, and due to the change of adding Kubernetes labels to these manifests, we have now the problem that scaffold does not work anymore on our local machines, and this is kind of cleanup task, or not, it's not a cleanup, it's just getting those manifests up to date so that scaffold is again working. Yeah, test and repair scaffold and add the Kubernetes labels to the manifests of all services. Someone out there who wants to take this one? Otherwise, I can take it and I will go through the manifests to make sure that they work again. All right, then the next issue. This one is not related to the Keptn core, it's related to the Promesa service, because before the Keptn 0.7 release, we decided for the Dynatrace service to not install Dynatrace anymore, the Dynatrace 1 agent operator, and we want to also do this for the Promesa service, because when you now deploy the Promesa service and when you do a Keptn configure monitoring Promesa's, then Promesa's will be installed on your cluster. And this is not a production-like setting, because when you want to use Promesa's for your Keptn use cases, then it's likely that Promesa's is already there, it's already running in your cluster, and you just want to connect your Promesa service with Promesa's that is there, and you don't want to install it again. And this issue is all about removing the install step from the Promesa service. As I said, it's not related to the Keptn core, it's a Keptn contrib service, but still it's important so that we are aligned with the Dynatrace implementation.
I can take this one.
Cool, thank you very much.
I will comment on this one.
Okay. Yep, then I will assign you to that issue.
Yeah, just send me, oh, I can see the link in the project, right?
So here, lots of coordination is required regarding the tutorials and the talks. So if you need any help, please always let us know. So this also has some big changes in the docs, or big changes in the docs are required here.
Okay.
So if you need help, please let us know.
Okay. All right.
I can also provide a little bit of maybe help because I was also creating a Grafana service that is basically also not installing Grafana, but just connecting to Grafana and configuring something in Grafana like a dashboard. So we can sync up on this, how I did it. Maybe it's a very similar way for Prometheus.
All right.
Cool.
Next week. Tomorrow I have day off.
Sure, no worries.
All right, then when we take a look at the backlog, we see that there are a couple of red ones. That's not a good indicator. Yeah, there are a couple of bugs and hiccups in the bridge, and I will take care of talking with Ermin about those so that we yeah, get these bugs fixed and to have also a very a smoother experience when using the Keptn's bridge. It's not, there are not big issues. They are more related to corner cases, but still we need to get them done to have yeah, a bridge that is working perfectly. All right, yeah, I will take care of discussing these issues with Ermin and also to define what the outcome should be. Yeah, they are all bridge related. And here further down, we have still one that is labeled as code first issue. Whenever you want to start working with Keptn or want to get started with implementing your first issue, please take a look at particularly this one and let us know whether you want to take it and want to implement that one. All right. Jürgen, do we have any other questions that came in?
Right now, we don't have any questions in the chat. I again want to highlight that Keptn will be having a virtual booth at KubeCon 2020. So that's from in about 2 weeks time, from August 17th to August 20. So you can join us there, also ask your questions there, or tell your friends about it so that they can come and visit us there. So it will be from August 17th to August 20 on during the KubeCon, which is a virtual event during the basically European times between noon and 9 p.m. in the evening. So if you have any more questions, we're still here. So Rob just added an issue. If you want to comment on this, Rob, then you can still do.
Yeah, this is just a simple thing I was seeing in the CLI. I was trying to validate some things using the get command, and it was just not consistent. For example, if I was saying get service, I would expect I could pass the stage argument as an option, but it seems like that's not supported. And you know, I try to write what I think you wanted the requirement to be, and maybe that's a good little grid to test it, just to see if that's working. But like I said, I was trying to say like get service, my service name, but it didn't support that flag.
Okay.
So maybe you guys can take a look at that. I mean, it's just in the back. It's just a new backlog item.
Yeah.
I mean, I would be interested if you call get service. So usually service is always in all stages in Keptn. So that's also the reason why we don't need the stage information here.
Well, you could say, I'm sorry, maybe I pasted the wrong one. If you say get service, let me put that one. So get, yeah, if you say get service stage name, it also fails there too. Let me, I can fix that real quick. My example. Edit. I'll fix it real quick. But There you go. If you want to hit refresh, I just fixed it.
Yep, but Rob, when taking a look at this example, this can't work because you have to specify from which project you want to get the services, and this information is missing, the project flag.
But logically, a service is not mapped to a stage. So service is always contained in all stages. And that's also the reason why we do not have this stage flag here.
All right, I'm just trying it again. Okay, so that may be the reason. We don't have to do this on this call because I know you guys are recording it, but yeah, so maybe we can just validate that. I'll validate it too on my side. And
yeah, and we will also comment on this issue.
Yeah.
And maybe make it clear why we don't support this flag there.
Okay, any more questions from the community? Otherwise, I think we are like 3 minutes early for closing this Keptn community meeting. And we are having the next Keptn community meeting next week, Thursday, same time, same channel. And yeah, thanks for all the discussions in this meeting. And have a nice day, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for the feedback. Bye.
Bye.